It was a typical Saturday afternoon in my small suburban neighborhood, the kind where you recognize most faces but no few names. I'd been living in my cozy two-bedroom apartment for almost 8 months now, nestled in a complex with just enough greenery to feel homey without requiring actual gardening skills. The neighborhood itself was a pleasant mix of young professionals, small families, and a few retirees who'd been there since the Reagan administration. My apartment was on the second floor, with a small balcony overlooking the community pool, currently empty due to the unseasonably cool weather we'd been having. Among my neighbors, there was one I'd noticed more than others. He lived in the unit directly across from mine, a tall guy with broad shoulders and the kind of smile that seemed perpetually ready to break into laughter. We'd exchanged casual nods and the occasional morning when collecting mail or taking out trash, but never really progressed beyond that. I knew he worked somewhere downtown because he always left early in pressed shirts and returned in the evenings with his sleeves rolled up and tie loosened. From the occasional glimpses into his apartment when his door was open, I could tell his place was surprisingly well decorated for a single guy. Actual framed art on the walls, not just posters, and real furniture that matched. I'd mentally nicknamed him Mr. Put Together and assumed he was straight based on nothing more substantial than the sports equipment I sometimes saw him carrying and the occasional female visitor. I should mention that I work from home as a graphic designer, which means I'm privy to the daily rhythms of our building in a way 9-to-5ers aren't. I know who gets packages too frequently, 3B, who practices violin at inappropriate hours, 2D, and whose cooking smells the most delicious, definitely 1A with their Italian grandmother vibes. It gives me a strange sense of connection to people I barely speak to, like reading a story without ever introducing yourself to the characters. That particular Saturday had started with a drizzle that gradually intensified throughout the morning. By early afternoon, the sky had darkened to the color of wet slate, and rain pounded against my windows with surprising force. There's something about a good rainstorm that always makes me productive, so I'd settled into my workspace with a large mug of coffee, my playlist of instrumental music, and was deep into designing a logo for a new client. The rhythmic drumming of raindrops created the perfect white noise, and I'd been working for hours without realizing how much time had passed. I was just stretching my arms above my head, feeling the satisfying pop in my spine after hunching over my tablet for too long, when I heard it, 3 distinct knocks on my door. The sound was so unexpected that I actually froze mid-stretch. I wasn't expecting anyone, and food delivery always texted rather than knocked. For a brief moment, I wondered if I'd imagined it, but then it came again, slightly louder this time. Curiosity piqued. I saved my work and made my way to the door. Through the peephole, I could make out a distorted image of someone tall. When I swung the door open, I was greeted by the sight of my neighbor, Mr. Put Together himself, standing there looking decidedly less put together than usual. His dark hair was plastered to his forehead, his light blue t-shirt clung to his chest, and water dripped steadily from his jeans onto the welcome mat. Despite his drenched state, he was smiling that easy smile of his, though with a slightly sheepish edge. "Your towels?" he asked, water droplets falling from his eyelashes as he blinked. His smile widened, revealing a small dimple in his right cheek I'd never noticed before. I must have looked completely confused because he quickly continued. "From the pool deck? I think they're yours, the blue ones with the little anchors. The wind blew them off your balcony onto the pool area. I saw them getting soaked and thought you might want them back before they turned into sponges." It took me a moment to register what he was saying. Then I remembered. I'd hung my beach towels out to dry on my balcony railing yesterday after an impromptu swim. With everything going on at work, I'd completely forgotten about them. "Oh, yes, they're mine. That's so thoughtful of you to rescue them," I replied, suddenly aware that I was wearing my oldest, most comfortable sweatpants and a faded t-shirt with a coffee stain near the hem. Not exactly how I'd planned to have our first real interaction, but you got completely soaked in the process. That was really above and beyond neighborly duty. He shrugged, that smile still playing on his lips. I was already wet from running back from my car. Forgot my umbrella this morning when the weather was still decent. He held out a bundle of dripping blue fabric, though I'm not sure I did these any favors. They might be wetter now than if I'd left them by the pool. I laughed, taking the sopping towels from him. The thought definitely counts. "I'm sorry you got drenched on my behalf." A drop of water fell from his hair onto his nose, And without thinking, I added, "Would you like to come in and dry off for a minute? I can at least offer you a dry towel as a thank you." There was the briefest hesitation before he nodded. "That would actually be amazing. I'm creating quite the puddle out here." I stepped back, opening the door wider. "Come on in. I'm sorry about the mess. Wasn't exactly expecting company during the apocalyptic downpour." This wasn't entirely true. My apartment was actually fairly tidy, but something about him standing there made me suddenly self-conscious about every minor imperfection. "I'm Alex, by the way," he said as he stepped carefully onto my entryway tile, clearly trying not to drip too much. "I've been meaning to properly introduce myself for months, but you know how it goes." "I'm Jordan," I replied, closing the door behind him. And yes, I do know. The classic apartment complex paradox. See someone almost daily, but never quite reach the introduction threshold. That earned a genuine laugh from him. Exactly. Though getting drenched while returning someone's belongings seems like a solid threshold crosser. I hurried to my bathroom and returned with my fluffiest towel. "Here you go. Feel free to use it on your hair too. Can I get you something warm to drink? Coffee, tea, hot chocolate if you're feeling particularly nostalgic for childhood rainy days." He accepted the towel gratefully and began drying his hair. Hot chocolate actually sounds perfect if it's not too much trouble. Very on theme for the weather. As I moved to the kitchen to prepare our drinks, I found myself surprisingly comfortable with this sudden visit. There was something disarming about Alex. Maybe it was seeing him disheveled instead of his usual polished self, or maybe it was just the absurdity of the towel rescue mission in a downpour. "So, Jordan," he called from where he stood, still trying to minimize his dripping, "what do you do that keeps you home during regular business hours? I've noticed your lights are off and on when everyone else is at work." "Graphic design," I answered, measuring chocolate powder into mugs. "Mostly freelance, but I have a few steady clients. It's nice having flexibility, though it sometimes means I lose track of whether it's Tuesday or Saturday." I glanced over at him. "And you're downtown, right? I've seen you leaving in business clothes." He looked surprised. "Good observation. Yeah, I work at an architectural firm. Junior architect, though that mostly means I do a lot of the detail work that the senior partners don't want to handle." "That sounds fascinating," I said, genuinely interested. "Do you enjoy it?" "Most days," he replied, running the towel over his arms now. "It's creative but also technical, which suits my brain. Though days like today make me question my life choices. Nothing like getting caught in a downpour in business casual to make you reconsider your career path." I laughed as I poured hot milk into our mugs. "I can imagine. Though if it helps, I once spilled an entire cup of coffee on my keyboard during a video call with a client. At least your professional disaster didn't have witnesses." The microwave beeped, and I carefully carried the 2 steaming mugs to the living room. "Why don't you sit? You've earned a proper break after your heroic towel rescue." Alex hesitated, gesturing to his wet clothes. "I don't want to ruin your furniture." "It's seen worse," I assured him, though this was a slight exaggeration. "Just put the towel down first if you're worried." He did as suggested, carefully arranging the towel on my couch before sitting down. I handed him a mug and took a seat in the armchair adjacent to him. Outside, the rain continued its steady percussion against the windows, creating a cozy backdrop to our unexpected meeting. "So," I said, blowing on my hot chocolate, "have you lived in the building long?" "I moved in about 8 months ago." "Almost 2 years now," he replied. "It's a good place. Quiet enough, decent maintenance response time. The pool's nice when it's not raining biblically." He took a sip and made an appreciative sound. "This is really good, by the way." "Thank you." "Secret recipe," I said with mock seriousness. And by secret, I mean I add a pinch of cinnamon and a drop of vanilla extract. He laughed, and I noticed how it transformed his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "I'll have to remember that hack. My hot chocolate game could use some upgrading." Happy to share my extensive beverage knowledge. It's really my only culinary skill. Everything else I cook has a 50-50 chance of setting off the smoke detector. Our conversation flowed surprisingly easily after that. We discovered we both grew up in neighboring states, shared a love for obscure indie films, and had both attempted and failed to maintain sourdough starters during the pandemic. The initial awkwardness of the situation, him sitting there in wet clothes, me in my work-from-home outfit, faded as we found more points of connection. "So what made you choose this neighborhood?" I asked, genuinely curious. The area was nice, but not particularly remarkable. Honestly, The trees, he replied, glancing out the window where the rain was finally beginning to ease. I grew up in a place with lots of greenery, and after college, I spent a few years in apartments where the only plant life was what I could keep alive on a windowsill. When I was looking for a place here, I walked around this neighborhood and noticed all the mature trees. Sold me immediately. He looked slightly embarrassed. That probably sounds ridiculous. Not at all, I assured him. I get it. There's something reassuring about being around trees that have been standing longer than you've been alive. Like they know something we don't. He studied me for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Exactly. That's exactly it. He paused, then added, most people just give me a weird look when I talk about choosing an apartment based on the surrounding tree population. Well, I've been known to make housing decisions based on equally unusual criteria. My last apartment I chose because it was above a bakery, and I liked the idea of waking up to the smell of fresh bread. That sounds amazing, actually. Why did you leave? I grimaced. Turns out living above a bakery means waking up at 4 a.m. to the sound of industrial mixers. The bread smell wasn't worth the sleep deprivation. This sent him into another bout of laughter, and I found myself enjoying the sound more each time I heard it. There was something genuine about the way Alex laughed, not the polite chuckle people often use in new acquaintanceships, but a real, uninhibited expression of amusement. As our conversation continued, I noticed the rain had finally stopped, sunlight now struggling to break through the clouds. Alex noticed it too, glancing out the window. Looks like the deluge has passed, he said, setting down his empty mug. I should probably head back and change into something that isn't creating a small pond on your furniture. He stood up, gathering the damp towel. Thank you for the hot chocolate and conversation. This was unexpectedly nice. It was, I agreed, standing as well. And thanks again for rescuing my towels, even if the rescue mission was somewhat counterproductive. He smiled that easy smile again. Maybe we could do this again sometime? Without the dramatic weather event as a prerequisite. I'd like that, I replied, surprised by how much I meant it. I'm usually home, as you've noticed. Feel free to knock anytime. I will, he said, moving toward the door. Though next time I promise to be significantly drier. As I opened the door for him, a shaft of sunlight broke through the clouds, illuminating the raindrops still clinging to the railing outside. Alex paused in the doorway, turning back to me. You know, in all the time I've lived here, this is the first real conversation I've had with any of my neighbors. I'm glad it was with you. Before I could respond, he was gone, crossing the walkway to his own apartment with a small wave. I closed the door, leaning against it for a moment, replaying our conversation in my mind. There had been something there, a connection, a spark of potential friendship, or maybe something more that I hadn't expected. Over the next few weeks, our interactions became more frequent. It started with simple hellos when we passed each other, then progressed to stopping for actual conversations. I learned that Alex had a younger sister in college, played recreational soccer on weekends, and had a surprising knowledge of obscure historical facts. He discovered my passion for vintage graphic design, my collection of vinyl records, and my irrational fear of geese. One evening, about a month after the rainy day encounter, there was another knock at my door. This time, Alex stood there completely dry, holding a pizza box and a six-pack of craft beer. I thought we could continue our neighborly bonding, he said with that now familiar smile. Unless you're busy? I wasn't busy. And even if I had been, I would have cleared my schedule for the chance to spend more time with him. As we sat on my balcony, eating pizza and watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and orange, I found myself thinking about how sometimes the most meaningful connections come from the most unexpected moments. You know, Alex said, breaking into my thoughts. I saw those towels on your balcony that day and didn't even think twice about grabbing them for you. Just seemed like the right thing to do. He took a sip of his beer, eyes fixed on the horizon. But standing in the rain, knocking on your door, asking about those towels, it might have been the best impulsive decision I've ever made. I couldn't help but smile. Better than the time you decided to try growing a mustache, I teased, referencing a story he'd told me about his disastrous facial hair experiment in college. He laughed, the sound now wonderfully familiar. Definitely better than the mustache phase, though the bar there is admittedly very low. As the conversation flowed into the evening, I reflected on how a simple act of neighborly kindness had evolved into something I now couldn't imagine my life without. All because of some forgotten towels, an unexpected rainstorm, and a knock at my door that changed everything. Sometimes life's most meaningful stories begin with the simplest of questions, even one as mundane as "your towels?" asked with a smile, standing in the rain. Total _char_count, 17,533.